right. Well, thank you, Dave, for the kind and warm welcome and introduction. Thank you all, gentlemen, here tonight who are jumping in on this call to join me and join all of us here as we get better together. Talk multiple topics here tonight, learning quick, and it's whether you're dealing with peewee-year-old football players all the way up to grown adults. Attention spans are reduced. We're talking 12 minutes a pop. So with that in mind, I laid out tonight multiple topics to hit on. Obviously open up some Q&A and some dialogue here as we go and unfold. So all I ask, similar to Coach Jackson, is, let's stay muted so that way no background noise gets jumped in. But if there's something you're dying to ask that's pertinent to where we're at in the part of the conversation, let's jump in there, because the last thing I know you all wanted to do was listen to a Jay Leno monologue here tonight with me. So want to create some interaction and then hopefully spur some thought for down the road as we migrate and move forward here, and maybe take a topic that we hit on tonight. Maybe then we can dive it down the rabbit hole, so to speak. So with that, thank you all. Let's go ahead and we'll shift gears here now to using our outline with the PowerPoint. We're going to be interactive back and forth with each other and interactive between toggling screens and visuals here for all of us. Yep. Okay, and then we'll full screen that. Perfect. First things first. Oops. Okay, let's get to the front. Let's get to the, there we go. Okay. First things first, gentlemen. Contact information. This is going to serve multiple purposes here tonight. So you have my cell phone number, you have my work email there through Minot State, and then each accordingly of social media. So Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram are all represented, because this is multiple purposes here tonight. We're going to talk ball and get into some good topics. This is also serving as now the Canadian coach on staff, and also specifically to the province of Saskatchewan. This is going to utilize also as my entry point with all of you here joining me tonight for high school, junior, youth, RMF, all the way on down for the equivalent of the May spring evaluation recruiting process. So I'm not leaving anything, no stone unturned. I'm trying to be found. I am not hiding whatsoever. So please take down accordingly. We will review that toward the end of the presentation. And then also on a go forward basis, being that you have this access of communication tools to get in touch with me, any of these slides, any of these film clips that we will get to tonight, Coach touched on already, it's going to be on YouTube. But also if you want to get more direct interaction and go back and forth with me, we can do that as well. So you have my contact information. Be it that we're comboing efforts here, just to give you a taste test. As far as Minot State football, we have on Twitter a ongoing convo, an ongoing session of round robin tournaments. As you can see, we do the uniform combinations, something fierce, large, and in charge. And then with that, be foolish to not get this out of the way as far as housekeeping items. July 18th, because until further notice, the show goes on, just like the fall. We're keeping fingers crossed. We're throwing prayers to the man upstairs that things will move and get out of this corona crisis that we're all into. So as of now, until further notice, the show's going on with camp for us on July 18th. And then obviously for all of us, the fall season with our host of games. So I just touch on the fact that nowhere else in NCAA football are you going to find this time to, and I note it there because I know this is on a Canadian province call. It is $35 US, but nowhere are you going to find, even for $35 US, which is a touch more Canadian, from 9 in the morning till 5 at night, this type of instruction, direct, multiple sets of eyes, hands, all involved with your kids. Derek Edholm is our offensive coordinator and quarterback coach, who is our camp director. So I include his contact information as well. And understanding here as we toggle the cursor, we're talking about your current grade 11, meaning going into this upcoming fall, grade 12, and even your upcoming current sophomore going into their junior year. We want to make sure we highlight specifically to those classes only. And notice, tied into an all-day event, we're opening up our doors left, right, front and center, the whole bit, everywhere in between. We're going to test you. We'll get, like I said, the instruction that you're not going to find that kind of value for anywhere else in North America, quite frankly, for that matter. Get you all the stuff that you want, all the evaluation that your kids and individual down to every single last kid that comes to this camp is going to have an entire day devoted to make sure that in the world, he's walking back north of the border, get back to people that much about it's a process as no. So this is padded camp, unlike most that you're going to find out there. And then also just for social media purposes, both our football and our recruiting page is included there. So I want to highlight that. I touched on already. I thank you, Dave, for the kind introduction. I would be amiss if I did not, and this is not a sequential or rank order, but at least as far as just getting it out of the way. Dave, I just touched on most recently, but at the top of it, Scott McCauley, on a couple of occasions, on a couple of notes specifically, where I pay a thank you to him and in coordination with Dave in putting these events on. I was able, and I was fortunate they invited me a year ago, and I was able to speak on a couple of different events that were obviously live, non-pandemic version that was there in the Regina Thunder clubhouse. And then additionally, in Scott's case, you know, he's heard from me. I've worn him out a time or two via text message, dissertation, book style, but I have to say it again here, and especially in a public forum. I'm not trying to put him, Johnny, on the spot. I'm being as genuine and authentic as possible. He reached out to me in a very difficult time period in my life last summer, and was one of the first people that not only reached out to me to comfort me and to just check in, but then as it turned out, we ended up working together. And I was able, hopefully, to provide some value to both him, his staff, and also his players as the season unfolded, as I, at that time, had a little more spare time on my hands. So I can't thank him enough, and for all he does, and then in coordination effect with Dave in putting events on like this, and for what they do just day in and day out for the Regina community, and just top to bottom, anywhere from directly with the Thunder and with the kids that they're working with on a day-to-day basis, all the way down to the RMF and everywhere in between. So both a kudos and a warm thank you to Scott and to Dave. These next two names, it would be just ridiculous if I did not touch on these. Gary Echeverry, I'm not in the Canadian Football League 8 of the last 11 years without him. He was my entry point. He gave me my first opportunity after being a graduate assistant at Fresno State University down in Southern California, or I should say Central California, depends on your geography. I'm not a geography major by any means, but you know, Etch was the first defensive coordinator I worked with, and he was ultimately so largely responsible, as we get into the topics tonight, for opening up my scope, my lens, my way of thinking beyond a robotic offensive line perspective. And we ended up doing a lot of things and having a lot of success together on 2 occasions, both in Saskatchewan and also in Winnipeg. And then tied in together with that at the bottom there, not by any means sequential order, it's just leading us into most recent with Chris Jones. Both between Etch and Chris Jones, who obviously the name goes without having to bog it down too much for the audience. We all know all of his acclaim and his accolades. That's the only other defensive coordinator I had the opportunity to work with. Those two, Etch and Chris Jones, were my defensive coordinators that I've been able to take a great amount of wisdom from. And now, in the first step of my career as a coordinator, able to hopefully implement and apply these lessons and put it into action. So tonight's topics, like I said, we're going to talk some people and pillars, call that philosophy, and we're not going to bog down with that. We're going to get into some run progression fundamentals in terms of eyes, feet, and hands, how we begin from the ground floor up, apply a little bit run pressures, fire zones, as they've called it in the NCAA for the last 20 years. BTF standing for blitzing the formations as an example. And then toward the end there, notice we do have a whiteboard in the back here, cross-training. My mind goes immediately to getting into offensive line protection schemes. So that way we get some run fundamentals, talk some run pressures, get into, from a scheme standpoint, we've all heard, I'm guilty as charged. I've always done typically pass rush tactics and fundamentals. Once again, another kudos to Dave Jackson from a few weeks ago. He nailed that thing 8 days a week, grand slam out of the park. So I don't really need to touch the fundamentals of pass rush. It's more so, how can we disrupt what the offensive line is trying to do? So ultimately here, now that I'm in the role of a coordinator, and I know as I noticed some of the names jumping on this call tonight, and including Scott, of course, as a head coach, whether you're a head coach or a coordinator, you're in charge, and your biggest task is developing your people. And specifically right now, as I have a couple of my fine assistants here with me, my linebacker coach and defensive line coach, what we're already been doing and implementing and utilizing this time of this quarantine to get better. Tonight we're getting better together, but every single day is taking turns and cross-training and developing your people, develop your staff. And then ultimately, our players are all splintered off. Everyone's players are all back at their respective homes. But when we are together, there's an other-centeredness that is involved that is so vital that we want to make sure we're plugging away and getting put in and poured out into our players and therefore into our respective community here in Minot and beyond. But the coordinator training, you can't do it enough. Is it time intensive? Yes. Is it intentional? Yes. It has a purpose behind it because you are teaching from the ground floor up your system, your protocols, your structures of the defense you're running, and you're developing ultimately to then disseminate out from your positional coaches, training them up to be coordinators themselves so they see the big picture as they microscope into their respective groups, and then able to disseminate that message and that information out to the players respectively. In terms of pillars, what do we as Minot State stand upon? It falls into these big three. In the end, and this is strictly for 2020, this is just where we're at right now as we are pouring the concrete of our basement. We're pouring the concrete in the basement of our house. We ripped everything out to the studs. I've been here for 5 weeks and we just have been going through. You could just ask these guys off here in the background. I got them here with me. I mean, they're eye rolling like a champ right now. We've been tearing everything down, ripping it to the studs to now build this thing back up on the defensive side of the ball. So specifically, point management, we're looking at 27 as our lid. This is not where we're throwing pom-poms in the air, celebrating over giving up if we say 27 points. We're using this as our ultimate lid. Turnover margin +1, in the end, that's our lowest common denominator. So in terms of going from a lid to a minimum, that's where we fit that in. And in a moment, I'll touch on why we find that number. And then ultimately, touchdowns yielded and explosions given up, 3 and 3. Again, those are being our lid. If we find with the research and the analytics that we've done, pair that into what we're doing as a football program on our other 2 phases, and specifically offensively, where those numbers, of course, skew in our favor as we look at things, and then we blend cohesively all 3 phases together. That's what we are using as our formula for success, our steps to success this year. Reason we have, as I toggle here with +1, is in the end, takeaways and scoring, however you wish to look at it. Offensive coaches on this call tonight, meaning the more points, the better. Us defensive coaches, less is more, of course, and takeaways accordingly. That's what wins or loses games, both short and long term. And where we see the inherent value of $1 million, an NFL analytics study years ago, and I learned this from Etch, was that a turnover in the National Football League was quantified as $1 million. Okay, and so those analytics go way beyond anything that is in the hamster that's spinning between these 2 ears. So I trust that the research is intact. When we see +1, +2, +3 is the simple fact, and we're going lowest common denominator in our own case at +1, is saying that is an 85% winning percentage if you are +1 turnover margin, and that's over a 30-year study per Bronco Mendenhall, who's the head coach at the University of Virginia. I gathered that intel. So of course, I let my imagination run wild and did a decade-long study in the Canadian Football League for what +2 and +3 yield. +2, 90%. +3, 95%. So again, I would relate it to any offensive coordinator who might be on this call tonight is your head coach asks you as the offensive play caller, do you have a 95% success rate play in the playbook? Yeah, coach, I actually do. Then why aren't we running that every single play? In a relatable fashion, we want to take the same approach of we have a purpose when we go out onto the field, and that is to take the football away. And we can only then, the next best thing is score with it. Notice non-offensive touchdowns is if we take it away. You can't score with the ball if you don't have it. Defensively, we go out to go take it away. Think back 2 years ago, Saskatchewan Roughriders tying a CFL record for non-offensive touchdowns. There's a proof in the pudding in terms of where you see the correlation for high success rates in winning. And then ultimately, we touch on the fact that, look, offenses want to control the game through the run. We have to earn our right to rush the passer. So for us, pairing it into the NCAA, the United States, first and third down is where we're going to make our money. As we shift gears, and please feel free, unpause or unmute yourself as need be if you want to jump in, if there's anything at all, but that translates or takes us into now our next topic. So when we talk in terms of run fundamentals, we talk in terms of our weapons. And the 3 weapons we have, and that's for all 3 levels of the defense and every position on offense and every guy on special teams, is your eyes, feet, and your hands. Because ultimately your eyes, for us on defense, is your pre-snap and your at the snap visual key. It is your trigger point to then allow your feet to activate and take us where we need to go. That's whether you're a defensive lineman, a linebacker, or a secondary player, a third level player. Anywhere it goes from the eyes to the feet. And then ultimately your feet will take you where you need to go to where ultimately, and I'm not going to do this to switch, screens and toggle back and forth for time purposes, but we want to, when we then now have seen what occurred, triggered our brain synapses to then have our feet as rapidly as possible take us to the job that is part of our task per that play. With our hands, our third weapon, because it works in that chain or chronology of order, we are inflicting whatever we touch. So when I say I'm not going to toggle back, I'll let you on your own time Google, just type in 1985 through 1989 Mike Tyson knockouts. You'll get miles and miles of threads. You'll have plenty of YouTube. That's the visual. That's the picture we want when we meet an opponent. We're not there to make friends. We have plenty of friends. They're all on our team in our same colored jerseys and helmets. Ultimately, we are inflicting anything that we touch on defense in an attack style. We are not trying to make friends. We are trying to discourage an opponent. Our progression, when we now take from our weapons, eyes, feet, and hands, is now with our eyes, what are our visual targets? And this is now drilling down specific into defensive line fundamentals. So the last slide relates to everyone on defense. And now we'll just segue briefly into defensive line play in terms of the run game. So our progression is simply this. One of 3 things in the end is going to happen to us on any given play. We are going to get in a man-on alignment. So let's think to ourselves, if we go from a shade on the center, a 3 technique, an outside alignment on the guard, a 5 technique, an outside alignment on the tackle, and on from there, whatever you choose to call your terminology, but meaning just a baseline outside alignment, inside foot back, inside hand down, targeting the V of the neck of the opponent that as he's in his stance. So what we talk in terms of is 3 things are going to happen off of that visual target. I'm periffing the ball because my inside hand is down, and my inside foot is back. I'm going to get a run too. Great. I'm hair triggering anyway, And the beauty with taking what occurs in Canada, which wink, wink, okay, as a little hint, there's going to be a significant Canadian flavor to the defense here at Minot State. I'll just leave it at that for now. But using Canada as the guide with the 1 yard neutral zone, what most people, when they transition to Canada, my experience with American players was, oh, what a disadvantage. Are you kidding me? You get a locomotive style train wreck effect, because now I'm getting for sure my second, better yet, my third and fourth step into the ground sometimes, depending on the case, before contact starts. So for us, we want to train wreck that man. And what LPS stands for is lock, peek, shed. So I've gotten a base block, I've gotten a run two, I've gotten a face full of offensive linemen. As the video in a moment that we will get to will illustrate, we then get into our lock, peek, shed component. If we don't get a run two, we get a runaway look, one of two. I'm either going to get a low hat to me or a low hat away from me. And the beauty of this, I know some of you are probably rolling your eyes thinking, boy, he's really dumbing this thing down to simplicity. The finest art in this game is to take complexities and make them as simple as can be. So I relate this to pro football players, as we'll get to some tape here from practice in a moment, from as recent as last season, all the way down to RMF, all the way down to Pee-wee level, 6, 7, 8-year-olds, however young they are when they start. These principles are tried and true and relate across the board. Run away. Okay, so now I did not get a face full of guard. He went away from me. So one of two things in this order is going to occur. By BSL, what we're saying is backside lineman. It's a backside lineman element. It's not a literal. It's a term that signifies that could be a backside guard, that could be a wing, that could be an off the line receiver who's waggling in and around the tackle box and looking to come across the formation. It could be same side of formation. Ultimately, BSL just says backside lineman, based on your scheme, I'm either a box or a spill player. To give you the initial intro with how we look at things, if it's in doubt, make sure we bounce it out. So we're going to attack most commonly, not always, most commonly with the outside arm. We want to hit the block thick block, hit the block thick, hit it with our outside arm, and then make sure that we create a spill effect on the ball. All CBR means, and this is more specific as you translate from, let's say, a 3 technique to a 5 technique, is cutback boot reverse. So I've gotten my key of run two, run away. And in this case, I got a runaway look from this offensive tackle example. I now am keying down the line. My eyes are down the line, any BSL element, backfield or pulling guard element, okay? At that point, there's nothing there because that takes precedence. I'm now a cutback boot and reverse player accordingly. All I'm doing for here is just for the effect, but we're not going to dive into that. That's what every other clinic's about, is pass rush. But ultimately, the only other thing left is hi-hat, meaning pass. And then you get into your speed, power, and counter combinations at that time. So I'm going to segue now, Coach. We're going to go from PowerPoint. Let's get to some tape and put a little visual now. Get a little visual to what we've just introduced. And then we can use this transition piece if there's any questions whatsoever. Feel free to unmute. I'm going to go ahead and it's already on me. Keep the, yeah. Good. Thank you, Coach. All right. So when we say pro football players, this is last year's training camp with the Saskatchewan Roughriders. By the way, you got a Regina Thunder alum, fine gentleman, Zach Evans right there, who's going to give us actually good tape to teach and learn off of, is this. We start from the ground floor up. So whether you're a grown adult man, all the way down to, like I said, 6, 7, 8 years old, pee-wee level, and everywhere in between, these principles are tried and true. So we start with a 6-point explosion. So 6-point meaning we're getting the 2 sets of toes, the 2 knees, and both hands. So 6 points of contact are in the ground just to begin the process. This is a good picture both here of these 2 players inside, of curling the toes, curling the balls of the feet into the ground, specifically right here by Zach. He's done this a time or two, obviously, okay? So we just are looking to uncoil. Notice I'm hidden here. I'm a little bit of a littler fella. I'm not a doorway filler like some of these large human beings are, but make sure it's a byproduct. Make sure you get what you emphasize. So if we're a ball get-off team, let's make sure we're incorporating and implementing that in every drill imaginable when able. Okay, so notice that's the ball trigger. So that way your players are training good habits. So just an introduction to uncoil like a rattlesnake, fire out, hip explosion. This begins the train of thought of hands and hips as a short phrase to title the drill. We then go to where now you've gone from 6-point into 4-point hands and hips explosion. So now, just bear in mind here, we'll just give it a second here to load up. Just as this thing. There we go. All right, we look like we're back here now. All right. Appreciate your patience. Okay, so now, okay. I am hardwired, gentlemen. And as we see, the technology world, far from perfect, but we're going to slug our way through. Thought process here, and feel free as this is buffering, if you will, with the internet. If there are any questions thus far, please do not be shy to go ahead and jump on in. But what we're transitioning here when we get to this clip, 4 explosion, the main point only matching the surface of his potential last year as a rookie and ended up getting some significant playing time in minutes for the Riders. And if we just keep having difficulties here, we'll look to just move on here. We'll just try to be patient for a moment. But ultimately, to give us the preview, it's hands and hips. Notice also it's a different implement now. So based on where we're located, especially right now in the middle of a quarantine, as I show these types of clips to our own players, is keep in mind, creativity needs to be at an all-time best and an all-time high. So obviously, our players are not going to be necessarily blessed to have pop-up bags at their house or in their backyard. You know, creativity, using fences, using other devices is where we need to make sure we come through. But notice here, okay, and I'm going to go ahead and move on here in just a moment if this thing just does not cooperate. But there's a coaching element to take involved here with the bag holder. And I know that's been touched on a meeting or two here as we've been in the middle of these Get Better Together Zooms, is you got to make sure you're coaching the bag holder to give enough resistance so that way the player who's performing the drill gets what he needs, gets enough resistance here. So I'm going to purposely skip now and see if we can get any luck, okay, with the next phase. Okay. It goes now from 6-point to 4-point hands and hips. This is now getting into the introduction. Hopefully we'll get some cooperative tech going on here. And again, we're hardwired. So just imagine how bad this would be if we were trying to go on a wireless Wi-Fi connection. Anywho, appreciate your patience, gentlemen. Is now taking it into the LPS, that lock, peak, shed progression. Specifically, before you even shed a block, you need to lock and peak and create the separation when you get the base block or the man-on look that you first go into every snap anticipating. Okay, so if I can maybe see if I can get some cooperation here. All right, we will come back. Okay, we're back live. Oh, I spoke too soon. The progression, and again, that's why I give the contact information at the start. In the case of situations such as this, where we're not getting great cooperation, from technology, able to then shoot to you as need be accordingly, okay? So the theme, hopefully, that we are able to separate the forest from the trees in terms of these technology bugs. I'm going to try to go back here, and once again, we are just getting the loading stagnation is going now from ground floor, 6.4 point, all the way now to where you're getting into a ball get off effect. And similarly, again, you showing for purpose the differentiation of the implements that we all, based on what we have available, are able to use. Creativity in a time of quarantine is, of course, at a paramount. But now, as you see here, as it's paused, we're getting now into a full ball get off, lock, peak, and shed mode. I'm going to keep this one running for right now while we got hopefully some now cooperation effect. So both players here, what we're training is ultimately now yet a different implement, but we're getting the same effect of training ball get off, training in this case the equivalent of 2-3 techniques, performing their drill, one to the left of the ball, one to the right of the ball. So the left and the right defensive tackle, as we would call it here on defense. And now the ball being inside of us, inside hand down, inside foot back. And again, the simplicity of just baseline core fundamentals of getting off the ball, uncoiling like a rattlesnake, eyes, feet, and hands coming together. And then what I really want to point out here, specifically with Charbel, is the emphasis that he's giving of the shed component. So now you see lock, peak, and shed, meaning keeping my hat and my integrity of the gap that I'm assigned, talking a basic gap control scheme, one hat, one gap defense. The shed effect, where now utilizing a same hand, same foot that we hear all the time in pass rush teaching methodology, it all applies also even in the run game when I'm shedding a block. So I'm getting off the rock, uncoiling like a rattlesnake. In this case, I'm the imaginary, I'm the pretend B-gap player to the right of the defense. I'm the B-gap player to the left of the defense. The rip, elbow to the sky, creating length, counterintuitive, that creates less of me, in which the blocker can get his hands and get a capture of me. And then same hand, same foot, as we're seeing in both players' instances of getting off, left hand, left foot, over here, right hand, right foot. And the phrase that we use is stack and lean. What you're seeing really well done right there by 98 by Charbel is he's looking to stack and lean back the pressure of that offensive lineman that he just destroyed and destructed the block upon. He's looking to make sure that he's leaving no leeway for that offensive lineman to recover or to maybe wash him or create a spacing issue between him and his fellow defensive tackle. So I'm going to just for fun see if we got potential cooperation, just to at least give the visual here. We'll give it one more go around, just retracing our steps back, and I won't bog us down too bad with this, but just to give us an instance, this was the 4-point hands and hips explosion. This right here introduced us, and it looks like we're not going to get it, but this is the introduction effect of now just utilizing our weapons of our hands that we're looking to inflict. Thumbs are up, elbows down, creating that crane-like strength effect with our upper body levers. And I'm just going to keep it moving here to then get us into the full progression as we're seeing here. So from there, let's get it now. This is nice. So we at least now we'll see if we get some hopeful cooperation of practice film now applying what it is we've just discussed. So if we can get some loading cooperation here, and again, that's why I put the contact info out at the start. If we need to create a segue and get more direct individually, I'm happy to share. So what we're looking for here is this 2-eye who's going to execute versus a base block the lock, peak, shed teaching. And just zero cooperation here. I appreciate your patience, gentlemen. As I said, not going to sweat it. We're not going to let that bother us or deter us. We're going to keep this moving. And that leads us into next phase of topic for tonight. So before I dive in, anything at all, any questions, any comments, anything to what we've covered to this point? So we've talked some philosophy, big picture, pillars as we call it, in terms of what's going to be our hits of success rate. What for us, in our case of points allowed, points responsible for being given up by our defensive unit, 27. That's our lid. 3 and 3. Those are our lids of touchdowns yielded and also explosions, explosive plays. We quantify an explosive play, 12 yards or more gained on a run, 16 or more yards gained on a pass. And then ultimately, our minimum is +1. If we're +1, that's 85% alone. That's when you factor in and group all the different variables. Time of possession, you can get outrushed. You can get out time of possession. All those other factors that play into a game, those get thrown out the window. You can add in every time you get outrushed. Still, the number and the marker +1 equals 85%. So we look at that as going to be our formula for success. No one unmuted, so I'm going to keep on rolling. Wink, wink. Jay Leno continues with the monologue. It's all good. Hopefully you're not all falling asleep just yet. So Falcon Smash 3 hot. This now leads us into the next topic of run pressures. So we talked philosophy, we talked run game fundamentals. And then now, how can we apply as change-ups within your overall structure on defense? How can you negate the run? If that's going to be important, if the offense wants to control the game via the run game, how can we mitigate that control and ultimately take control back by gathering possession if we're not busy taking the ball away ourselves? And by the way, this is nothing new. This is NCAA playbook 101 for the last 20 some odd years. They call this famously America's Blitz. So Falcon Smash 3 hot. Falcon is for us an under front, as you see here, where we have the field in this drawing located to the left. So we have our bubble located to the field. We premise as an under front, which is no secret. Nothing's changed. We're not changing the defense here at Minot State. We hope to hopefully build and get it back from the concrete floor of the basement on up. So what we're doing here with our down linemen are executing long stick technique, meaning they are looking to cross the face of not the man they're lined up on, but rather the next man. That's the beginning point on the first level. Smash in this case, S&M, meaning Sam and Mike linebacker. So we're taking it's a 5-man pressure. It is a run-oriented pressure. It becomes a pass on the run or manufactures pressure on the run, but it's predicated on being a run pressure. So Sam linebacker is already, lined up as whether you call it a 7 or a 9 technique, outside aligned on the tight end. This is a pro formation, as they call it here in the United States, the premise formation, which the San Francisco 49ers brought back in vogue, very much so this last football season, to where people are spending their entire offseason studying how to defend 21 personnel in the United States. He is your edge defender, and the Mike is going to follow the field side defensive end, who we call stud, who's long sticking first, and he's going to cross just behind him. He's going to use the landmark of the B gap, which we know is going to move, but that's his initial landmark. We have 3 long sticks, 2 people over the edge, and then now behind it, we relate it to a 3 under, 3 deep coverage. Nothing new. This has been going on for 20 years. We have a middle hole player, and we have 2 what we call skiff defenders, standing for seam curl flat, and then paired behind them, a deep third player on each side, and a deep middle player who's responsible for the triangle. Before I shift gears into tape, so far so good. I'll use the
Coach, we do have one question here for you. Actually, it's a question from me.
Okay.
Can you talk about the difference in your teaching of the two slants you have there? You've got the long stick and your rack. How do you teach that from a one gap slant to a two gap slant?
Sure. So in both cases, I'll use the picture to guide us here. These represent our defensive linemen's feet in their stance. So I'll just kind of Photoshop that, because what we utilize, and this is a way, it's not the way. It just, for me, I found it to be the most effective for a couple purposes, meaning the inside foot back. These represent the feet of each of the defensive linemen. Just a quick sidebar, just so you do know why we do it. The inside foot back, inside hand down is twofold. It allows a better peripheral vision, that, and this is feedback I've gathered over years from players, that it allows them that peripheral vision to the ball. We use the ball as the ultimate truth, even though it doesn't talk, yet it tells the truth, because when it moves, we move, okay? And to piggyback a great coaching point that Coach Jackson made a few weeks ago, as far as make sure not only you're teaching that the ball itself moves, but what part of the ball moves. That's a great coaching point that was a great reminder for me. So as soon as that back tip wiggles, we're gone. So now to differentiate these two movements, because as we see here, this player is lined up as a 6-eye. This player is lined up here in this photograph as a 2-eye, as we call it, inside shade of the guard. He is inside shade of the tight end. So ultimately, the further we have to go, the coaching point we make, Coach Jackson, is the further I have to go, the more I need to back myself off, because and this is where, again, I can't give you the dissertation of why that works on the specifics of the geometry, but that's just ultimately the experience telling us that the shorter distance you have to travel, let's put him, let's say, as a 4-eye, let's put him as a 2-eye. The 4-eye has the shortest distance here. So ultimately, and I'll get to this in a moment, maybe that combos up the question, but let's use these two players here. I'm going to be taking more of a 45-degree track with my inside foot here, because my distance is shorter than it is for this player in this photograph. I'm going to be taking a flatter angle step with my inside foot. So I'm loaded, my weight is loaded, if that makes sense for everyone. It's loaded on the outside foot, because I'm going to press off this foot to then get me going, to slingshot me into the direction in which I'm heading, I'm looking to head. And then whereas now this player, to make sure that we're not giving it away to an opponent, to how we're doing it, this player here, I give the player one of two options here, because this one has some sensitivity to it. So I give the player, whether he feels more comfortable because it's a shorter distance and his feet are reversed than the most common examples over here, he can load up his back foot. He's probably going to have a less elongated stance, not so much toe to heel, but rather toe to instep, to make sure that foot can be loaded and take his first step with this outside foot, or load up as he would his stance like I described with these two players, load up his outside foot, and then actually momentarily cross with this inside foot, cross to take his first step, and then immediately get rapid turnover of his feet, because he has such a shorter distance to travel to become our contained defender opposite the pressure. Does that, hopefully, are we on the right track to answering your question, Coach Jackson, and hopefully maybe some others?
Yeah, that's great, Coach Shep. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. So to get into some tape here and to just create a visual of what it is, twofold. Notice this is not one of our finest hours. I'm not going to sit here like I'm sure we've all been through, and I've been guilty of it myself along the way of, oh, you just clip off the best outcome plays ever known to mankind, and you'd make it out to be like it's your play in and play out methodology. Not quite. I'm purposely showing, call it medium. Really, we hope to be calling this lousy. This ends up being a 6-yard gain as we see here. But there is some good to take with it. So there's some good, there's some bad. So as we see this here ultimately we get, right at that moment in time, paused, super technical, 2x2. I know at the snap he ends up being on this side of the midline, but let's for fun right now just call it, hey, what we have are 2 eligibles, not including the dude who's receiving the snap in the backfield, and we have what we call 2 extended into the boundary. So we have a mistake made here right from the jump. What should be happening is the biggest theme that we want to drive home is our skiff players, our seam curl flat players need to relate to the number 2 receiver. And so as you can see here, you know, on the not so good, right? So I'm here on a clinic, but I'm showing partially of what we don't want to have happen, what we don't want number 2 receivers to be scot-free. So that way, if it had been an RPO where he chose to raise and throw, pardon me, and or if it was a drop back pass protection, I mean, we're leaving a guy uncovered because as we see, to go back to the design of the play, the field strength is right as the defense looks at it. Field strength is right. So we have Sam and Mike off of the right side edge of the defense as we see it. So we see the mistake that was made here, ultimately. And as you now see going on inside the box, I think to help drive home the learning here, and we can get into, you know, if there's any Q&A to get into, far from perfectly executed. And this is where we as coaches are going to come in here. And that's partly what we've been doing with not only coordinator training and developing our staff from literally the youngest all the way on up, you know, the newest all the way up to the most veteran staff member on our defensive side of the ball, is also making sure we're ripping down to the studs the how. The magic is in the how, coaches. Any person can get Joe Smith off the street and teach him what to do, like we just saw on the diagram a moment ago, to introduce this most common fire zone, 5-man pressure, run-oriented defense, where you can blitz the formation to hit on the BTF element, where you can set it to a back, you could set it and trigger it off of a tight end, or in this picture here, as you see, off of a detached wing H-back football player. You can do any variations. I'm going to just we look at this, what to have of case of 50, and I think relates hopefully to piggyback Coach Jackson's question as we got into some dialogue off the photograph, is one of 2 things. Because you have the longest distance to travel, this player here, by design of the play, you're the field side long stick player looking to cross the face of that guard. One of 2 things. I can either back myself off vertically from the line of scrimmage, or I need to get myself into an align to execute, ATE we call it, where I might be thick, I might even be darn near head up to the offensive tackle. Now the good and bad to that is I can accomplish my job. We don't want to live in that world, because in the end you're giving it away. You're giving it away to your current opponent in game, and then you're giving it away on film. So there's a balance that you want to find with each of your players. You want to make sure you're coaching individually. But right here, the how, one of 2, this player needs to either back off or he needs to align to execute, would be the coaching point here. We're getting some good work going on here in terms of the work of the racking player on the center, the nose, and then the latting at the time 3 technique. You know, I think the real theme you want to get into also, coaches, is the mix of your alignments that I think can also help not only disguise, but play to your player's strengths here. So we're getting some good work here by this player and this player to clog up, create a traffic jam, if you will, with multiple offensive linemen and not many of us into that car wreck, into that mayhem there. But what we want to do is not have our second level players dive up into that mess. The coaching point is let it play itself out. Anytime we're moving a front, and this goes anywhere from Pee-wee all the way up to pro football, and as we're seeing college tape here, is you want to leave your second level players enough breathing room to operate. And then it also allows potential readouts and playouts on the run. So this here, same pressure, just a different view. So now field is left. You have a static 2x2 formation. You have number 2 extended to the top of the screen up to the field. Differently than before, we're not leaving him uncovered, which is a good note. The thing that we want to coach up here at the bottom, now this ends up being a 5-yard completion. And I like to think, because I've been on that side, I've been in those rooms on the offensive side of the ball, where at that moment in time, successful, what I have found, and now hopefully defensive coaches, you're nodding with me here as we say this next phrase, they want the explosions. That's what they live for. They realize that it takes a diligence, a patience, and you're increasing from an offensive point of view, your margin for error of your ultimate success of the drive. If you think that we're just going to live in 5-yard hitch route completions all the way down to matriculate the entire field, especially on a Canadian field since there's more of it. So ultimately, good for them. They got a 5-yard completion on a 2nd and 7 to bring up 3rd and 2. But in terms of our execution, in terms of the box, we are much cleaner here, getting to back to time to task here. And specifically, as we look at these 2 players here, we would like better pad level from the racking nose, but I really want to highlight some positive work here by jersey 54. You notice from an outside shade on the guard, he is working, and notice, to go back to Coach Jackson's question, he's utilizing an outside foot first step, which is fine. Because this is your non-traditional look where you're moving or you're long sticking opposite of the hand that you have down and the foot that you have back in your stance, in this case his left hand and his left foot, this is where you have to cater, I feel, to your players' strong suits and let them experiment. Use practice for what it is, meaning failure should be preached and applauded throughout practice. It shouldn't be hindered. You want to lessen your failure in game day. You want to let failure occur during practice to let your guys see what works best for them. So as you can see, he's using an outside foot, so he's loading his inside foot to execute his movement. Similar to the prior picture, to where one of 2 things with this player needs to occur. Ultimately, if I'm going to protect my alignment exactly, back off because I have the furthest distance to travel, or, and you see it more in this case, he's not backing himself off, but he is aligning to execute. And so as you see here, he's not able to get exactly where he wants as far as a landmark's concerned, meaning crossing the face of the guard, but he is able to take and utilize the space away of the guard and the area that is inside, specifically getting to and digging out that softened A-gap area momentarily. Similar theme, you see Sam, jersey 28, off the edge, Mike following closely right off of his long stick, defensive end, and turning tight paths. We want to be thinking tight off of same color, similar from a pass rush point of view. When one talks about naturals, you want to be working tight off of buddies' colored jerseys, not opponents' colored jerseys necessarily. And so with that, that takes us back. So what I can do here, I'm going to just switch the screen, use this as a transitional piece to take a deep breath for all of us. Any other, yeah, so we'll go, let's get it to full screen here. Any questions, anything unclear that maybe needs further detail on, or anything whatsoever? Feel free to unmute and spit it out.
We don't have a question here at this point, Coach, but when they come up, I'll get your attention.
Okay, sounds good. All I have behind me, you don't need to bog yourself down. This is more so my notes, as far as discussion points now as we transition and migrate. And like I said, hit me up, okay? I'm out in the open. I mean, shoot, there's no hiding. I'm easy to find. All I got to do is if the FBI was coming after me, all I'd have to do is just walk outside. I mean, it's not like I'm hard to find, right? Between social media, my email, you have my personal cell phone number to text me accordingly. This is just an outline of some topics that I think, as I brainstormed, and I want to shift gears now into this type of interaction, getting on the board a little bit. And notice, the topic specifically was talking in terms of cross-training. I touched on how we cross-train as a staff within the defensive room, meaning giving Coach King, giving Coach Nye opportunities of, hey, great, here you go. Here's the dry erase marker. Get up on the board and install our day one defense. Coordinator train your people, develop your people. We do that within our side of the ball. And then what we've been doing recently here on Friday Fun Days in the afternoon is then taking that method and cross-training in between our full staff. So what we've been doing routinely is having our offensive line coach join us to get that type of synergy going on of he brings a topic, brings something up, protection, let's say. We go through it and we have all of us in our defensive staff room to be able to, with proper social distancing, of course, we're not hugging all up on each other by any means, is able to then problem solve, come up with solutions, and even dial in, think ahead of potential issues that may come up. So that's going on typically on Fridays. Then tomorrow, just as an example, we have cross-training with our O-line coach as a defensive staff. He brings a topic, we bring a topic, we get the juices flowing in the synergy. And then similarly, tomorrow we're including our wide receivers coach to then take it from the box, from the core, and take it out to the cylinder, out to the perimeter, and talk pass game structures and things of that nature. I encourage to take, if there's any one thing to take, whether it be from the film tonight or the PowerPoint or maybe a topic, if there's anything to take, I really highly recommend and encourage each of you to take back to your staff, wherever you may be. If you're a head coach, a coordinator, or if you're a positional coach, at least the thought process of, hey, develop one another. And then also too, as a staff, create that cohesion. So without bogging you down any further, I'm gonna start with what we call the 60-61 premise of protection. And so as questions jump up, feel free. So I'm just gonna get us started here and make sure that you guys see that okay. And don't you think one moment, just because I'm gonna draw up some protections, that I'm gonna go upside down. This is a defensive oriented meeting. Thank you very much. Okay, so case in point, let's get into box play here in terms of offensive line protections. How do they begin? So I'm gonna draw up just a sketch here, nice and loose. Okay, I'll put it with our characters that we utilize. So if one premises with a one back set, a 6-man box contour, in this case, 4 down linemen, 2 inside linebackers, that's the beginning point of 60 pass protection. So I'm going to go through 60 and just take it on through. And if anything, to be able to then spur into some of these other topics that I brought up, to where maybe there's some juice back to our respective staff. So the 6 starts in terms of the thought process of how many are in the protection. So in this case, it's a 6-man protection, 5 offensive linemen and the running back located to the right of the defense. So it tells us 6. It also, to not bog us down too bad, it tells us it's a 5-step drop concept of the quarterback, anywhere from a 7.5 to a 9-yard final launch point. The 0 in 60 pass protection talks to the zone side of the protection. So this is referred to as a backside to front side or zone side protection scheme. So if you cut it in half, and this is just taking it down to the most generic level, and then we can get into perhaps the adjustments that they're thinking. So we're always, as a defense, thinking one step ahead. is this. The offensive line, make sure that's visible, okay? So the O-line is responsible for the 4 bigs, the 4 down linemen, and I'm going to put here FS for front side or call side, zone side, Mike linebacker, a Mike point. Doesn't mean it's the literal Mike of the defense necessarily. If we reverse the drawing and made this 61 protection, the point is the literal will, but meaning it's the Mike declaration, just so we're clear. So the O-line is responsible for the 4 bigs and the front side Mike. So I'm just going to put PT here, meaning he is the point in this example, which now tells us, as I go down, make sure that's visible for us. And then coaches just cross-train and help me out and make sure that we're visible and all good, and holler at me if there's any issue. The running back is responsible for, that says first ND, standing for the first non-declared. So in this example, four down line and the call side Mike by the O-line. The back is responsible for his first non-declared, anything to his side. So to relate, let's talk CFL example. Let's pretend the field's left, is to the right, and we have your basic day one install of 3 receivers to the field, 2 receivers into the boundary. So the idea now as you go through the running back's thought process is, as I shift gears over here, is first non-declared and then anything to his side. So you can think of a boundary corner, a boundary halfback, the free safety, taking his way on down to the back side of the protection. And then finally, final scan rules. So he goes through a 3-step thought process of, okay, I find the Mike point and I use that to then click over to the first non-declared. In this example simply is the quote unquote will linebacker, anything to his side to scan. So that's the starting point, okay? With that zone side, because now you split it to where running backs here, these 2 are big on big with these 2, and then you have these 3 who work to the Mike, and then the next phase of the coaching point, so he's responsible for the 4 bigs, the front side Mike point, and then as I just put an asterisk here now to complete the thought, anything further to the side, to the zone side of the protection. Simple example, the Mike's a dropper, but the Sam linebacker or the dime, whichever you call him, is your edge player. The offensive line, if they're coached well, should be able to still fan out to that because that's 3 of the 4 most dangerous in the protection scheme. So it starts with the Mike point, but then can also potentially fan to the Sam linebacker in this example, to the 3 of the 4 most dangerous rushers. To relate back to what we were watching on video most recently with smash. So now the point is coming. Let's get him out of the way and let's just keep it for simplicity. We'll just leave him here and the Mike point's just going to cross behind the defensive tackle. So now in the same example, so you have Sam coming 4 to a side. So now this is where you tie in both. The O-line is now covered because they have their Mike point. He came. We're 3 for 3. Our zone side is secured. The back went through his thought process of first non-declared, nothing to his side, and he became the scanner to the what we have referred to as the 4th threat, meaning the 4th dangerous rusher. The idea of bringing 4 to a side, okay? So I just say, I go take us back through this, just to get our wheels spinning a little bit to now migrate into some examples of keeping things so simple, knowing the general contour and just the premise of how a 6-man drop back pass protection begins to then now use it to our advantage as defensive coaches from a planning perspective. Before I erase, so far so good. Am I okay to erase the black marker here just to provide some examples? Silence, I take as thumbs up. So going once, twice,
Coach, I've got a question for you.
Cool.
If instead of this front here, maybe it was more of an over front.
Okay.
So you've got the nose, in A gap or even a plus minus technique on a center there.
Yes.
And they turned it into more of a 4-man slide with one bob. What are some things that if you identify a team is doing that, what are some things you'll do with that backside end versus that concept?
Okay. Glad you asked. So now, that prior example before switching the drawing would be an example where it's a 3-man zone side. What Coach just discussed, because of the shade here, thick on the center by the former one technique, the shade now, it requires the offense to borrow the guard into the protection. So now it's a 4-man slide. The 4 men are responsible for now 4 of the 5 most dangerous rushers to the call side. The call side is still the same. It's still the zone side. The difference now is you have a one-on-one with this offensive tackle here on a true island with your defensive end. So for starters, to get your question answered, what are some things we do with this backside end? First of all, we give him the island by creating a true over front to where if he spots and locates that he's to the same side as the back, and then here's the other tip, fellas, defensive coaches. Sorry, offensive coordinators, it ain't your night. Let's bring our players a greater heightened awareness, because the center and other offensive linemen do this also. So you get run pass keys 8 days a week, but also too, just in this context, when the center is pointing, in this example, the Mike linebacker, our players have that intel to use to our advantage. So to relate this example, the entire box has that to our advantage to know, well, they're zoning this side. This is now the man side of the protection. And so now, specific to that end, to Coach's question, I am turned on. I know that drawing got very messy here, but meaning I am turned on as a radical rusher. I have a free 2-way, you name it. I got a multiple way path to go win, rush to win. A phrase we have used is turning on Freeney, hence Dwight Freeney, if you will. So meaning radical rush. If there's ever a time to sail up the field and hit that patented ice pick, spin move, what have you, turn it on. We're giving it to you. And then built into that, if we know that this is going to be the 4-man slide, this is where the coordinated effect that I know Coach Jackson talked about a few weeks ago, where it's not just a one-man show. There's no independent contractors. We're giving you an opportunity in to go rush to win. It's just like one-on-one pass rush in practice, which we all find is unrealistic. And I've coached O-line, so you're always sitting there, punching your own head because it's not going to be like that. But your offensive linemen lose confidence because they're losing a vacuum environment, mass land involved rush. A lot of land that they have to defend versus a free radical rusher, which never happens in the game. Well, now we're giving that opportunity to our end, but more importantly now, working in coordination, pardon me, with my nose, I get the center who I'm covering, and he's working away from me. Well, there's only one dude left who can block me, and that's this guy, the guard. So I'm going to feel in a hurry, and remember, my inside foot is back, side down, closing that distance. But I feel heavy presence by the guard. One tells me, get packed, become a cover me player. I know my buddy's turned on to his Freeney rush, Mathis rush, whatever you want to call it. It's all good. Okay. Call it Clowney, pick a name. He's doing what he does. He's rushing to win. So I'm going to cover him up, meaning I'm anticipating. I'm going to go and sell hard penetration in this fashion. That center is likely going to thick, to give a visual here, and buddy set me, give me some body presence to buy time for the guard to come down and get me. And then as soon as I contact that guard, by that point, my end has made his decision. He's either staying with his true edge rush, or he has come underneath. And then ultimately now me as the cover me player, if my end has come underneath, all I'm doing is replacing off of him, off of my buddy's color, to relate that theme from the run cutout. If he stayed up high or traditional normal contained rush, he's just going to beat him with speed and work to the outside. I take the same approach to where I will retrace back across the guard, but I don't have to worry about covering my buddy at that point. I did not see his color pass me in my vertical portion of my charge or my rush. So now I just become a one-on-one rusher. I've turned it back into that original example of 2-on-2 to the backside of the protection. Does that help answer your question, Coach?
Very much so. Thank you.
Okay, great. Now, I'm just going to clean this up, because related to that and related to hopefully some helpful 411 or tips and clues that we can now empower and equip our players with, as simply as, hey, number 49, Mike 49, we take that intel as a defensive set of players playing the game at a higher level, just loosely and simply, and say, either it's a run that's directed this way, a zone run most commonly, or the protection scheme is designed to come in this fashion. Meaning if I'm a player over here where the point occurred to the linebacker opposite of my location, whether I'm the linebacker or the D tackle or the D end to this side, hey, mano, mano, mano. And I'm just giving examples of the in-game person-to-person communication that's going on of saying, hey, we're on the man side. Turn it on. Here we go. Those types of things. So to hopefully help our players. We as coaches know all this stuff. The more we can get what's in our brains into the brains of our players, and better yet, have it wrapped so much to where our players can turn their brains off and just cut it loose and go play, I think we're heading in the right direction. So now let me drop a new clean look, and let's now relate. I'm just going to put, for simplicity here, since it relates to the point versus non-point example here, and I'm just going off some notes here, just some, I think, topics that I think can prove helpful. Let's go back to just a simple drawing where now keep it within a 5-man pressure scheme, pass-oriented pressure. Okay, so we talked a little bit run pressure earlier, right? Smash, they call it America's, right? For short, America's Blitz. It's been for the last 20 years. The key being it's all in the execution, in the how, not the what. Everyone's doing it. So now let's do a simple, super simple example. Let's say now we'll put the back located here to that original example without drawing it all in. Let's say we have that origin of 60 protection, center, guard, tackle, working Mike point to any edge presence, 3 of the 4 most dangerous. And for fun, let's put this player back covered as a 1 or a 2-eye, depending on your system. And so let's turn on, real simple, okay? Will go as a simple call. Will go. Great. Will, better yet, you're going to align to execute. As the middle of the cadence is unfolding, you're going to unwrap and get yourself down there into the first level of defense off the edge. As it unfolds, like we would anticipate, because this player was pointed out, we as players realize we're on the man side of the protection. Wonderful. Okay, well, if will go is occurring off the edge, let's have our end get out of the way to allow our will to have the edge. So as an example, let's just put a word. Let's just say, and this is where, you do it so many years, you just kind of pick one of the Rolodex items from one of the places you've been at, right? So let's call it jab will go. Jab's talking to this end, to the side of the bubble, get out of the way. I got my will in this case coming off that edge, get inside. Great. So we're anticipating the big on big side of the protection here, where the back, based on his simple protection rule says, I got the first non-declared. The first non-declared's making his intentions known. So now I come off the edge and I know I'm going to get the block of the back. From this simple example, let's go through scenarios of where you could just keep one pressure, just as simple as this. Jab will go and be able to now defeat the protection scheme. So in this case, and I'll just keep it to the half line look, we won't even fill in the rest. To the man's side, this end is going to go and hard charge and dive into that B gap area using the heel line of the guard as his targeting area to really get out of there. Get this edge tightened down, right? Make that offensive tackle move his feet, come down and block. The nose is taking a similar path to the heel line of the center here, making this guard have to come down. So remember on the run cut up, we talked about landmarks. Well, the landmarks are going to move. We know that going into it. But now if we're visualizing this, we've taken now a traditional two-man surface edge, half line look, and we brought them down as close to the midline as possible. To now give and turn alive your will, who knows this, if we're talking advanced stage where, hey, we saw that me as the will linebacker, if I'm the will, and I was not pointed by the center, my buddy got pointed, great. I'm live. I'm on it's going to be the back because there's nobody else left. So now as the back comes and addresses me, we'll go to the opposite example shortly. As the back comes to address me, I'm going to come hard underneath, and my aiming point is the feet of the quarterback. I'm looking to disrupt the launch point. If I end up winning the rush cleanly and utilize a pass rush move, bonus. That's icing on the cake. Doing, DYJ, do your job. Fit part, my 111th down here, 112th up north with y'all and SAS is make sure I'm doing my part. So my part on this simple pressure is get to the feet of the quarterback. However I need to do that. So screen, have a move in mind, chop rip. Coach Jackson and I both know about that as always a fun favorite to start with, and to bring continually that edge down with me. Well, coach, if he goes to the feet of the quarterback, he came off the edge, who's got contained? Let's get to it. Similar to the prior example where it was just a two-man, not a line game, but rather a cover me in a similar fashion, because we're all clued in. We all know that, hey, our buddy on the opposite side of the formation got pointed or identified, so we know we're getting the man side of the protection. One of two ways to cover up your will, cover up the equivalent of the end on that Freeney rush we discussed. One would be with the end himself. Okay, great. I'm hard charge inside because my will is going to scream hard underneath the back. He's going to go underneath the back right now, and as soon as his jersey color, my buddy's color, crosses my face, I work back out. Tight. Not taking a Cadillac turn because I'm quote unquote contained. Remember, we want, if we're hitting it well, we want to take an offensive line and we want to bunch them up together, whether that's in the run game or the pass game, and for sure in the pressure game. So in a related way, the end can become the cover me player, or better yet, the nose. Okay, this is where you can really squeeze that edge down. Okay, so now just to relate, Will's just doing what he's doing and continues on his track saying, you know what, I'm going to get to the feet, or as coach talked about, the eyeballs of the quarterback, the collapse component of the rush. And then late, because this example also serves a dual purpose. Most quarterbacks, as we know, are right-handed. To this example, you're away from the throwing hand where the pressure is occurring. Late, even better, I'm a fan of these, is late, your nose with that dotted line effect. Not a Cadillac turn, but that dotted line effect where he had a wash of not one, but two of his buddies' color jerseys past his face. And then all I have to do now is work a move to the outside of the guy who's blocking me, the guard. And I'm going to be, it's one of two. One of my buddies hopefully might have won his rush, but even if not, if we're playing team cohesion, right, pressure defense, quarterback's going to get flushed right into my lap, and I'm walking into a sack, into an opportunity here for a lost yardage play. I'm going to pause. Am I okay to erase, Coach? Any questions coming up on the chat? Anything at all to dive further into on this example?
Yeah, we do have one question here, Coach. It's asking, how do you teach the ends to retrace their charge after seeing the will?
Okay. To answer that question, tell you what, I'll use this example just so that it stays up and we can clean up the drawing. So I'm just going to put an X here. The same example occurred to this side. And the question, I want to make sure I'm clear. How do we teach the end to retrace? Maybe what tactic or pass rush move to utilize? Is that?
Yeah, it could be tactic, pass rush move, or maybe even the cover me aspect.
Okay, good. So same example, going to this side to clean up the drawing. I dove to leave my edge player the availability to do his job, his task, to cross and come in front of the back, get to the feet of the quarterback. So now as we're visualizing this, even as I'm standing here, my inside foot was back. Boom. I hard triggered. I know I'm going to be getting this tackle to block me. So I'm not going in to give away my chest or my ribs. I'm going to be coming in thinking chop to begin with my outside arm initially in my stance to make sure I'm guarding myself and protecting myself. And then it's one of two. This is where I think you play it to your player's strengths. Basic starting point, day one, would be work a club or a hump move, a club counter back in the direction where you began from, to then get yourself back to where my left hand in this example is free. If you have more of a Dwight Freeney type player who is more advanced, that's where an ice pick can also satisfy the same effect. Take off, protect yourself with a chop here. You're diving through, you see your buddy's color pass, and then as I'm just walking through tactile, I'm spinning, I'm ice picking myself back up straight ahead right off of him. So to create at least having a couple of tool belt items, most commonly, most simply, a club counter, a cross face, a cross or a clear effect with my left arm, my outside arm originally, and then finishing with a rip and a clear back across his face would be most common. But if you have the player to execute it, an ice pick can also work as well. Good there?
Thanks, Coach.
Okay, all right. So let's talk now. I'll clean it up. What if we call jab will go and we get the zone side of the protection? And I hope you're digging this as much as I am because it's the simplicity. We're not getting into exotics. We're playing a day one defense against a day one pass protection scheme, just doing it over and over and over again. And I think that's where, again, the magic comes in. It's the how. So getting back to, okay, 4 down line front. Same example, jab, will go. And in this case, advanced. Hey, the point occurred here. We pointed jersey number 40 for fun. Okay, great. We pointed this player. Advanced is your players know. Great. They called our side. Now we're going to defeat the protection. So meaning, in this example here, 1, 2, and 3 are taken by 1, 2, and 3, the zone side of the protection. Wonderful. Now what we do will, because I'm getting the offensive tackle setting out to me, stay with a contained rush. We'd love for you to win. Don't get me wrong, but stay with the contained rush. So you're teaching your players half-line looks. You're taking a mass play and you're just reducing it down to half-line looks, 2- and 3-man looks. If this, then that. Meaning the prior example, if it's the back takes you, get underneath him right now and get to the feet of the quarterback. If not, that means only one other guy can block you. It's the offensive tackle. The tackle sets out to block you, just stay to the outside and make sure that we keep contained on the quarterback. fun part that I like also with this, and this is where you can turn it on too, I'll get to that in a moment, is now this guy is going to be untouched because the nose is getting vertical. He sees the center, he reads him, he's going to come, and the center's going to come block me. Great. I'm going to work slightly awkward. I'm not going to go crazy with this, but I'm just going to slightly take my path to where I'm bringing the center where I want to go, where I want him to go. I want him to come with me this way. I know at first you're probably thinking, well, wait, the launch point's over here. This is where it gets good. Jab, defensive end, dive into the B gap. And as soon as I get a face full of guard, I'm looking to now collision. And only I would not collision if my nose guard actually has such great takeoff that his color passes before I get there. But the teaching point, the beginning point is collision, cross face, you are untouched because there's nobody left because the man side of the protection is busy. They got work going on over there. Technically, sure, the back would be the only guy left, but my goodness, if it's a running back standing between you and the launch point, think Undertaker, think Kane, WWE choke slam on top of the guy, okay? We're hopefully painting a picture there. We painted some Mike Tyson earlier, a little WWE. I've been missing it like a champ. WrestleMania with nobody in the stands. I don't know what I was doing with myself. Back to task. So we can defeat the protection both ways, man side, zone side in this case. Anything to add on, questions to kind of pause here as I'm in between coaching points or topics? We doing okay?
No questions at this point, Shep, but this is great stuff.
Okay, cool. And purposely, Dave, I want to be respectful of yours and everyone's time tonight. You tell me. I got other topics. You basically, as you know me, over-prepared, right? So meaning whatever time slot, I want to give some good juice here to these coaches here tonight. So meaning you tell me the off button at any point, but if we still have an audience, if we still have guys on the chat, I'll keep chatting. Right?
Yeah. Let's go one more, Coach. One more example. Let's see it.
Perfect. Let me do that, and I'll give it off of the inventory. So I'll give it to you or anyone who has a must see. So we got simple off that. We can do the equivalent of might go, meaning an interior pressure off of those simple examples. That's one option I listed here as a topic. We could get into killing, I call it kill the duel, meaning the zone side of the protection when you're bringing a 1+ blitz concept, sting most commonly called. We could talk about how to defeat with a 5-man box, but how to disrupt the equivalent of a dual side of the protection to the trolley side of the protection, just to at least give some options. If there's anything that jumps out that we want to talk about, we could keep it nice and simple. We just did jab will go off an edge. We could just say might go as an interior pressure. I'm easy going.
Yeah, let's go might go, Coach.
Cool. All right. I'm going to erase those, which as you need them, if you need to get them back, we can do it. So now we're arming our players with some good intel, like we've discussed. Okay, 6-man box, same example. I'm gonna go ahead and put the back over here for fun. So the premise being it's 61 protection, everything remains the same. Now you're just opposite. Zone side is over here, man side, back side of the protection is over here. Now, offensively, because they know what they're doing, of course, they'll line the back up here and then shift post-snap his responsibility to make this the man side and this the zone side to not give away what they're doing. Line them up in pistol, line them up one way, maybe before the snap, late stem him or motion him. And so there goes into, as I'll get into the might go, interior pressure equivalent of what we just discussed with the will. Super simple pressure, but at least now you're covered versus maybe if I didn't get the look we wanted. Maybe the running back's not that good of a blocker. We want to get the will go effect on that prior example to the big side or the man side of the protection so we can take advantage of it. Versus, you know what? We got a beat on them and we can get the zone side and corrupt the protection with that collision crossface of the jabbing defensive end. At least you're arming your players with, if we didn't get the look we thought we were, or that the game plan, at least now, the back or on offensive line is the now. Yes, let's okay, over front, over to be crystal clear. So let's cover both guards with our interior players. Okay, our edge players are going to be edge players in these two examples. Okay, because now we're turning on the mic. So now, mic go, and let's do this for fun. Let's premise it with the look that we would anticipate. The back's located left. So we think this is the man side of the protection. This is the zone side of the protection. So great. My will in this sample got pointed. Great. I know I'm turned on. Wonderful. So I'm going to go and I'm going to go dive that A gap right here. This is fun. So now, and it plays out exactly like we anticipate, meaning they gave it away. We know that information. The back stayed to his side and he's responsible for me. Wonderful. Unlike will go, where we cross the face of the back as an edge player, might go, we just do the opposite. We coach our second level puncture player, as we call him. He's puncturing like the plunger of a syringe. He's puncturing that A gap. And now, instead of crossing his feet, he's going to go opposite. And what that's going to do now, because this is the man side of the protection, the sooner he does that, once the back declares and he creates, and that now to get into step-by-step advanced stage, the more he nudges, the more he bumps, the more he accidentally on purpose pounds the hip pocket of this guard, who he knows is the big side, big on big, man side guard, who's free again. That's right. We go here on the initial rush. The more we set ourselves out by alignment, the more we get that dramatic effect where this large human being who's 300 pounds has to move his feet to get out here. The mic clears. I see my buddy's color pass, and I retrace right here. Beautiful. Right up the midline, right up the gut. It's beautiful. It's the shortest distance between 2 points. That much geometry I do know, and I'm all about it. I'm a fan of that. Which means over here, in a coordinated effect, that means I got the center coming to me. So in a similar fashion, I get the center coming to me to that prior will go example. Keep him coming. Don't go letting him come back and create a spatial issue between the work that's going on with our mic and our defensive tackle. Okay? So we got this void occurring, and you got a free hitter on just a simple 5-man rush. Before I erase, anything to touch and go and add on? Because I'll just give the opposite example.
Now, Coach, with that said, do you get as advanced as where you let the linebackers check it after they identify instead of calling it?
I'm glad you asked. So now, as you get your players clued in, schooled up, you get them raised, advanced stage where they're seeing it and thinking it like us as coaches. You're getting what's in our brains into your players' brains. Get this. So now you could say, go check as an example. So now by game plan, you get them calling it. Me and you as an example. Me, you call, right? Me, meaning I'm going. Or you go. Okay, as simple terms and ways to verbally communicate with each other, because let's face it, we can't text out there on the field. At least I haven't seen that one yet. But yes, you can absolutely, that's PhD. That's next level within your day one install of just installing your first front, plain old over G defense, 4-2 box, one linebacker or one back set. We're getting into our just one gap, one hat look, gap control like everyone does it, but you're drilling down such the details to where that becomes a difficult play to block consistently. And these guys are playing fast, lights out, because they've done it a ton of times. They've got reps, reps, reps. So now you just say, go check. And by game plan, okay, if the center pointed me, if I'm the Mike on this example, and the center pointed me, and we want to use the example that we just watched, meaning we want the bubble linebacker to hit interior A gap to the back side of the protection, you. And everything we just discussed would be in that example applied oppositely. Better way to say it, to keep the drawing up, I got pointed. I'm the Will, I got pointed. Hey, you. Boom. And we get that effect. Just super quick here, just to relate the other drawing. So now, same example. We let this player, he's going to be the puncture player, but now it happens to be to the zone side of the protection. So he's the point, and the point comes. So that means the back is located over here with first nine declared, anything to his side to scan rules, okay? So now, this is good stuff. Hope y'all are enjoying this as much as I am. I can't wait till we're back in meetings, actual meetings, not Zooming, but actually with our players and getting out on the practice field, okay? It's gonna be some good times. All right, so now, same effect, zone side of the protection. This is where now it gets so nasty. So now he takes that same effect that we discussed with the nose guard on the prior example, and we still free up the equivalent on that jab will go of the defensive end, collision, crossface, okay? Or just let my buddy's color pass right now. The more I know I'm to the zone side of the protection, middle linebacker, the more I can come up, use the space of the A gap as my initial landmark, excuse me. But know that I'm going to get the center coming to me, so immediately go in and go collision. Get on the back hip of this guard and go collision that thing and look to ricochet myself back. Makes it very difficult for these guys. And again, that plays into loosening up the alignment, right? Still keeping, because of it being an interior pressure, keep automatic contain rules for your edge players. They're still rushing to win, but they're ultimately, in other words, stay out of the way of the middle. We got jazz going on up in here. We got good music going on. So stay out of the way. All right, don't crowd the club. All right. So now, boom, and it's one of two, dotted line, or maybe the center senses it coming. He passes off the mic to try to make a switch call. But now the mic has ricocheted on the back hip, the back butt cheek of that guard, and then looks to ricochet himself back behind. The biggest key coaching point, we've got to get a vertical rush component by that player. On the prior, other example of the jab will go, that end who becomes the guy who corrupts and defeats the entire protection, he can't just go right away because it'll get flattened off. And your penetrating players, the Mike in this example, he'll get flattened off and they'll, hey, they're big and they're smart guys. They're gonna grab you and do whatever they got to do to get your defender where they want him, which is in front. We want to be occurring on the backside hip pockets of guys. So the key coaching point is making sure we're still getting great get off. We're getting off the ball, getting up the field, creating the space early to then take the space late. Coach Jackson, coaches all throughout the chat, are we in good shape? All good?
Yeah, Coach Shep, that's been fantastic. So, you know, it might even be worth a second session, just strictly chalk talk like you do. And I think there's extreme value in that.
Awesome. And please, you know, let me, and Coach, can you help just go back? If you don't mind, just as we wrap things up, let me just, yes, just put back real quick where, that's it. Yep. Perfect. Just a quick reminder, we touched on already, coaches there, as far as our camps, like we talked about, specifically on July 18th. Don't need to bog you down with that. It's more so right there at the top. Coach Jackson, Coach McCauley, thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to continue getting better myself, getting better, hopefully all of us one and together tonight. Again, I just leave that just so you do have all of my contact information. And again, I'm not trying to hide. The FBI can find me in 10 minutes. It's no issue whatsoever. I just appreciate all of you jumping on this conference call, this Zoom call here tonight to get better together. And I just, again, thank you, Coach Jackson, for allowing me the opportunity. And hopefully, absolutely, I'm an easy audience. We can do this again. We can just name a day and time here as we go forward.
No, that's fantastic, Coach Scheper. I appreciate you and your Minot State staff there for getting involved and sharing some ideas with that. That's fantastic. Coaches that are still on here, be sure to check out the YouTube page, share that information with your staff. And next week, we'll be going 2 sessions. Tuesday will be Brett McMahon talking some more D-line stuff from the Regina Thunder. And Wednesday will be Miguel Reveles from the University or Laverne University in California. And he'll be talking three phases of punt return. So that's what we'll be doing next week. Take care, everybody. Coach Shep, thanks again. I look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you, gentlemen. And thank you, gentlemen.
Oh, yeah.
And
Stop share.
we'll talk.
Stop recording.
Yeah.
Do you want to stop recording cloud? If yes, receive email notification when the cloud ready.